My name is Benjamin Avery. I'm 79 years old, a retired history professor, widower, and father of two. I've lived in the same brick colonial house on Elm Street for almost 5 decades. It's a quiet life, mostly structured around my books, my garden, and the occasional chess game with my neighbor Frank. Or at least, it was quiet until today. It started with the usual kind of call from my son, Patrick. "Dad," he said, his voice oiled with charm, "you wouldn't happen to have a few hundred to spare, would you? Diana's car broke down again." That was the third time in 2 months. Each time, a different excuse. First it was the plumbing, then rent being a few days late, now the car. I sighed and rubbed the bridge of my nose. How much this time? $650, just until Friday. I transferred the money while Patrick continued to talk. Aimless, meaningless chatter about weather and work, most of which I tuned out. After a few more minutes, he thanked me profusely and hung up. Or so I thought. I was about to set the phone down when I heard it, his voice, still on the line. "You didn't hang up, genius," Diana's voice said, sharp and amused. "He never notices," Patrick replied with a laugh. "Honestly, he's too old to figure out how phones work anymore." "Blind, stupid, and rich," she added. "I told you this would work." I froze. The air seemed to drain from the room. "Did you see his account yesterday?" Patrick said, his voice low but clear. I pulled out another $450. Easy. "He'll never check," Diana answered. "He thinks the bank balance just changes by magic. He's stuck in the past." Something cold settled in my chest. My own son, my daughter-in-law, mocking me, robbing me. I quietly ended the call and stood there, stunned. Then I walked to my study, powered up the old desktop, and logged into my bank account. My hands shook as I scrolled through the transactions. Dozens of withdrawals, all small enough to avoid notice. But together? Thousands. Thousands I had saved over decades. Every hour spent tutoring, every consulting gig after retirement, every penny Emma and I had scraped together after she passed. And just like that, a simple phone call changed everything. I wasn't just old, I'd been made a fool. But I wasn't going to let it end that way. So I quietly got dressed, picked up my leather briefcase, and walked out the door. To the lawyer. The next morning, I didn't go to the lawyer's office. Instead, I went to the one place I knew I could find someone who wouldn't lie to me about Patrick, his old friend Arthur, who worked the morning shift at McLaren's pub. The bar was nearly empty at that hour, just a couple of regulars nursing coffee and whiskey in the far booth. Arthur stood behind the counter, wiping glasses with the slow, deliberate rhythm of a man who'd seen too much and learned to care just enough. "Mr. Avery," he greeted, blinking in surprise. "Wow, haven't seen you in a while." "Morning, Arthur," I said, as I took a stool. "Mind if I ask you something personal?" He set the glass down, expression shifting from cheerful to cautious. "Sure. Everything all right?" "Do you know how Patrick got into my bank account?" "I don't want trouble," he said. "I like Patrick, but he's been not himself lately." "What did he tell you?" Arthur sighed and leaned closer. "Few months back, he was drunk. Said he figured out your PIN. Told me it was your anniversary, April 22nd, right? Said you were predictable." I said nothing. My heart was pounding, but my face remained still. Arthur seemed to shrink a little. "Sorry, Mr. Avery. I didn't think he'd actually—" "No, it's not your fault," I interrupted softly. But inside, something had broken. April 22nd. The day Emma and I were married. The date etched into my ring, still worn every day since she passed. That was the number he used. My son, my own son, had taken the one memory too sacred to ever speak lightly of and used it like a crowbar to rob me blind. I nodded politely, thanked Arthur, and left without another word. Patrick and Diana's house was a rental in a nice enough suburb, all gray vinyl siding and neat lawns. Diana's car was in the driveway, which meant they were home. Patrick answered the door. "Dad? Everything okay?" "Number, may I come in?" Patrick's face drained of color. Where did you get these?" "The bank," I said. "Unless you want to tell me these are someone else's handiwork." Dad, I can explain." "No, just tell me if it's true." Patrick's mouth opened, closed, then finally he nodded. It was me. I felt a knife twist in my chest but showed nothing. "Why?" I asked. He shrugged, helpless and ashamed. I needed help. I thought it wouldn't matter. Diana stood now, arms crossed, voice sharp. "Oh, for God's sake, Benjamin. You're sitting on more money than you could ever use. You live alone. What's the big deal? It's just some cash." I turned my gaze to her, cold and steady. "It's not just cash. It's trust. It's the last piece of your mother. And you," I looked back at Patrick, "you used our wedding date." Patrick flinched. Diana didn't. "So what?" she snapped. "He's old. He forgets things. You wouldn't even notice if we hadn't slipped." "But I did notice," I said quietly. "And now, things are going to change." I stood, picked up the papers, and walked to the door. Next stop, the lawyer. Back home, the silence felt different, heavier, louder. I sat in the chair by the fireplace, the one Emma always curled up in during storms, and stared at the framed photograph on the mantel. Her smile, my arm around her, and Patrick, no older than 10, grinning between us. I'd given him everything. When Emma passed, I didn't travel like we once dreamed. No Greece, no Norway. I stayed behind to make sure Patrick and Diana didn't fall apart. I paid their bills when work was slow. Took care of the down payment on their first apartment. When they fought and nearly split, I covered therapy. When Diana lost her job, I gave without question. I told myself it was what fathers do. We sacrifice. We give without keeping score. But now I knew the truth. They weren't just careless. They weren't desperate. They were entitled, calculating, laughing behind my back. I rose from the chair and picked up my briefcase again. This time, I didn't hesitate. The bank smelled like polished tile and printer ink. A polite young man with a perfect haircut guided me into a private office. "I'd like to report unauthorized activity on my account," I told him. He clicked his mouse a few times. "Of course. Can you give me some details?" I handed him the documents I had printed. "These, dozens of them, over the last year." His brow furrowed. "Do you suspect identity theft?" "No," I said. "I know exactly who did it." The man looked up. "My son," I added, calm but unwavering. "He guessed my PIN, took money without permission, lied to me." That quieted the room. He nodded slowly, switching to a more formal tone. "I see. We take this very seriously. I'll submit a fraud report immediately. We'll freeze the account for now and open an investigation." "Do it," I said. "Let him explain himself when the bank calls." For the first time in days, I felt clear. Not angry, not sad, just ready. It was time Patrick learned something I should have taught him long ago. Actions have consequences. The call came just after dinner, while I was washing dishes and letting my thoughts settle. The phone rang violently, like it was being yanked through the wires. "Dad!" Patrick's voice cracked with fury. "What the hell did you do?" "I reported a crime," I said, drying my hands. "That's what decent people do. You reported me, your own son." He was shouting now. "You're destroying this family. Over a little money?" "No, Patrick. Over trust. Over dignity. Over my wife's memory." There was a pause, one heartbeat of silence. And then Diana's voice came on, venomous and cold. "You're not well, Benjamin. You're not right in the head. This is elder abuse of your own son. Maybe someone should look into you." She hung up before I could respond. I stood there for a moment, the quiet creeping back in. But this silence didn't feel like peace. It felt like a storm was building just beyond the walls. And it came the next morning. The knock at the door was hard and official. Two uniformed officers and one in plain clothes stood on my porch. "Mr. Avery?" the taller one asked. "We have a warrant to search the premises. We received an anonymous report that you may be harboring unregistered firearms." "What?" I blinked. "That's absurd. I've never owned a weapon in my life." They didn't argue, just stepped inside after I nodded, dazed. As they began their careful, methodical sweep of my house, I stepped out onto the porch. Mrs. Halverson from across the street stood on her lawn, arms folded, eyes narrowed. Mr. Green, 2 doors down, paused while trimming his hedge, staring. I'd lived here for over 40 years, never even had a noise complaint. And now, I was being treated like a criminal. My jaw tightened. Patrick. This was his retaliation, a false report, a whispered accusation. All because I refused to be his silent victim. The officers found nothing, of course. They apologized, professionally but coldly, and left me in a house that suddenly felt exposed, vulnerable. I stood in the entryway for a long time after they left, the echo of their boots still in my ears. My son had declared war. So be it. It didn't take long for the internet to catch fire. The next morning, I received a message from my neighbor's granddaughter. "Is this you, Mr. Avery?" she wrote, attaching a video. I clicked, and there it was, me, standing stunned on my own porch as the police searched my home. The caption read, "Sad day. My father-in-law, Benjamin Avery, suffering from advanced cognitive decline, was searched by police today. We love him, but this is what untreated dementia can look like. Please pray for our family." Diana's face filled the screen in a follow-up selfie. Her voice cracked just enough to sound sincere. It's hard, watching someone you love spiral into paranoia, but we'll do what's best for him. Always. The comments were full of hearts and hugs. "You're so brave. So sorry you're going through this. Poor man. He needs help, not judgment." It made me sick. I stared at my own image, framed by suspicion, wrapped in lies, and something inside me hardened. They were trying to steal more than my money. They were trying to rewrite the truth. That wouldn't happen. I began recording every phone call, every visit, every whispered insult, every backhanded concern. Then I called an old contact from Emma's side of the family, her cousin Nolan, a former police officer turned private investigator. "I need to know everything about their finances," I said. "What they're spending, where it's going." Quietly. Nolan got to work. Within days he sent me photos, receipts, and statements. New handbags, spa weekends, a leased Jaguar, dinners at restaurants I'd never stepped foot in. They were burning through my money like it was lottery winnings. I didn't get angry. I got ready. I set the trap on a Monday. I called Patrick, told him I was ready to forgive. That maybe Diana was right. I was lonely, confused, maybe even getting a bit forgetful. I said I wanted to make things right while I still had my wits. His voice lit up with relief. I told him I was considering amending my will. "Let's meet," I said. "Just us." We scheduled dinner at my house for Friday night. I had the cameras set up by Wednesday, small, discreet, tucked between the bookshelves and the vents. I bought a cheap bottle of wine and placed the fake legal papers in a manila envelope labeled "Will, updated." Let's see how sincere he really is, I thought. On Thursday morning, I made the call. "Patrick," I said, voice slightly shaky. "I got a call from the bank again. They said something looked off with my account. They might want to interview me." There was a pause, then an edge of panic. "What? What exactly did they say?" "Just that they're flagging several transactions. They want me to come in tomorrow and give a statement." I suppose I'll go down there, see what they're talking about. Dad, don't, he blurted. I mean, not yet. Let me call them. Maybe it's a mistake. Maybe we can clear it up without dragging you into something stressful. That was it. The fear, the guilt, it was all there in his voice. I ended the call with a quiet, "We'll talk soon." And then I saved the recording. By noon, I was sitting across from Marissa Callahan, a seasoned estate and financial fraud attorney. Her office was modern and crisp, her eyes sharp. I handed her the folder. She flipped through printed transcripts, bank statements, photos of luxury purchases, screenshots of Diana's video, and a USB drive containing the phone recordings. By the time she reached the end, her jaw was tight. "This is thorough," she said. "Painfully so." "I want to file a civil suit," I said, "for damages. Every dollar they stole, plus the cost of the investigator." Marissa leaned back. "You understand this will be public. Your son, his wife, they'll be on record for theft and manipulation." "I know," I said, "but I'm not the victim anymore. I'm the plaintiff." By Friday morning, the paperwork was filed. $59,000 in stolen funds, fraud, exploitation of an elderly relative, defamation tied to Diana's public accusations. The trap had already been set, but I didn't even need it. Because by Saturday, the calls started again. First Patrick. "Dad, I heard you filed something. Look, can we work this out? I'll pay it back. Not all at once, but in installments. Don't ruin everything. Please." Then Diana joined in. "We were stupid, okay? But it wasn't malicious. We thought it was just borrowing. You don't need to humiliate us. What will people think?" "I'm not interested in what people think," I said, voice level. "I'm interested in what the court thinks." Her voice turned brittle. "You're making a mistake, Benjamin. You're throwing away your own family." "No," I replied. "I'm finally protecting what's left of it." Click. Their manipulations had lost their grip. For the first time, I felt free. Courtroom 3B smelled faintly of varnish and nerves. The seats were half filled, mostly strangers, a few curious onlookers, and one woman from the local paper scribbling notes. Patrick and Diana sat to my left, just a few feet away. He looked thinner, pale. She wore her courtroom smile, that carefully constructed expression of concern and composure. But neither of them could look me in the eye. My attorney, Marissa, began with precision. She submitted the bank records, the timeline of transactions, the PIN, my wedding date. Then came the photos, designer handbags, spa bills, the lease contract for a luxury car. Then we played the recordings. Patrick's voice, sharp and laughing. "He's too old to notice." Diana, blind, stupid, and rich. Patrick again. "He'll never check." The courtroom was silent except for the audio, each line a nail in their coffin. Then came the phone call, the one where Patrick begged me not to go to the bank. His voice filled the chamber with panic. It was the sound of a man with something to hide. They tried to respond. Diana claimed it was all a misunderstanding. Patrick said I gave them the money. He simply forgot to keep track of the gifts. Marissa stood and calmly played another clip. Patrick admitting he'd guessed my PIN. Diana saying, "He won't find out, will he?" Their lies collapsed under the weight of evidence. The judge, a woman in her 60s with tired eyes and zero tolerance for nonsense, delivered the verdict without flourish. Full compensation in the amount of $59,000 to the plaintiff. In addition, the defendants will pay a penalty fine of $15,000 for malicious intent and public defamation. Court is adjourned. The gavel struck wood like thunder. I stood, calm, solid, free. Outside, Patrick rushed after me, his tie askew, desperation in every step. "Dad, please, this will ruin us. I'll lose my job. Diana's already being harassed online. Can't we just settle?" I turned to him slowly. "No," I said. You chose this. You had a dozen chances to stop. You didn't. Actions have consequences, Patrick. Tears welled in his eyes. He reached for my sleeve. I stepped back. You'll survive, I said. And maybe you'll learn something this time. I walked down the courthouse steps into the late afternoon sun. The sky was clear, and so was my conscience. They began to pay. First it was the Jaguar, gone in a week. Then Diana's handbags showed up on resale websites one by one. Jewelry pawned, electronics sold, Patrick's gaming consoles, her designer shoes. It all disappeared in a blur of desperation and debt. Diana's social media, once flooded with filtered brunches and weekend retreats, went silent. No teary updates, no pleas for sympathy, just a profile photo and a wall of stillness. Then, on a quiet Thursday morning, my phone rang again. Benjamin? It was Diana. Her voice was soft, careful. I don't want to fight anymore, she said. I thought you should know. I'm pregnant. Silence. I said nothing. It wasn't supposed to be like this, she continued. Patrick's a good man. He just made mistakes. And now we're paying for them. All of us. Please, for the baby's sake, can't we stop this? Just cancel the fine. Anything. We're exhausted. I closed my eyes, and I remembered. He's too old to notice. Blind, stupid, and rich. We'll get him out of the way. And then the police at my door. The search, the humiliation. No, I said. Calm, certain. You don't get to hide behind a child now. You had a chance to come clean before it ever got this far. You chose to lie. You chose cruelty. You don't get to rewrite the story now. But I wish you well with your child, I said, cutting her off. But this ends the way it should, with you learning that people are not disposable. I hung up the phone. For the first time in months, I felt something unexpected. Not guilt, not anger, relief. Because the guilt they fed me for years had finally found its true home. With them. The first check arrived 3 weeks after the judgment, $1,500 sent by certified mail. A note, written in Patrick's familiar, rushed handwriting, accompanied it. This is all I could manage this month. I'll keep working. I'll pay it off. I promise. I believed him. Not because he'd changed, at least not fully, but because he had no other choice. Patrick had taken up full-time work at a warehouse on the outskirts of town. Night shifts, grueling hours. The kind of job that left your body sore and your spirit raw. He wasn't complaining now. He couldn't afford to. Diana had left him, or rather, gone back to her mother's house 2 towns over. There was no online trail of her anymore. The last echoes of her influencer life had vanished like mist in sunlight. No more spa days or curated meals, just reality, and a baby on the way. The rest of the debt, $72,500 with penalties, would take years. But I wasn't counting the dollars anymore. What mattered was that they were no longer pretending, no longer lying, and most importantly, no longer winning. One evening, I sat on the porch, the same creaky chair Emma used to rock in during early autumn evenings. The wind carried the faint smell of damp leaves and cut grass. The house looked tired, but sturdy, like me. The shutters needed repainting. The back fence sagged a little, but it stood, and it was mine. Built board by board after Emma and I married, it had sheltered our arguments, our laughter, our dreams. It had held Patrick when he was born, held Emma when she died, and now it held me, an old man who had lost many things, but not himself. I thought about all the years I'd tried to buy love through sacrifice, how I gave when I should have said no, how I excused when I should have confronted, but no more. Emma would have been proud, not because I punished them, but because I finally protected something that mattered, her memory, my dignity, and the truth. I took a deep breath and looked out over the yard, the evening sun casting long shadows across the grass. I had no regrets.